welcome. We're about to go on a very deep ride into the world of UAP. The US government has dropped several files to include videographic evidence of things that we could tie up to UFOs, UAP, and aliens. What also inspired my video is a conversation that I've had with a friend of mine who is an atheist. He doesn't believe in energy, spirituality, God. For him, all of those topics are completely made up things to make us happy. But I have some rebuttal that I didn't get to do in person, but I hope that if you're an atheist out there and you question the existence of God and things that are above us, I hope you get to watch and you keep an open mind. And you can always let me know in the comments what you feel about it. I would like to thank my existing subscribers for sticking around. This has been a little bit of an interesting period. On one end, I've had a trip to Europe. I went to Spain, Italy, Ireland, and I got to have a lot of fun there. The trip to Ireland was particularly significant for me because I recently discovered that a lot of my Norse and Celtic heritage may come through Ireland, and being there in person and actually seeing the sights has helped me reconnect with the side of myself and my family. So I'm really thankful for this trip. However, during that time, one of my properties caught fire. If you're considering helping, the best help you can give me is by liking, commenting, sharing, and following my page. Not only my YouTube page, but all of my other pages. So let's get back to our conversation here. So I was sitting at breakfast with one of my friends. He's an atheist, and I like to push buttons. I always like to help people think outside of the box. This was after the release of the first batch of files, almost a month and a half ago. I asked him, hey, have you seen the UAP files? What do you think? He stated, these files could have an easy scientific explanation. They're not alien technology. If we had an alien civilization out there, it would be tens of thousands of light years away. And because we cannot travel faster at the speed of light, it will take them forever to get here. Well, first of all, there is a possibility of beings living longer than us. Our lifespan may be going towards 120 years. There could be beings out there that live for 500,000 of years. So potentially they could jump on a ship as long as they have enough means to sustain themselves. And we could also have a mothership that could have multi-generational beings. Maybe we can send droids or technology as well. It doesn't have to be us. It could be computers that have maybe work with nuclear energy. Nuclear energy can last for a really long time. So if we control it, if you're an advanced civilization, we could send drones essentially to capture evidence of other life out there. So totally a possibility. And there's even a theory out there stating that gray aliens are actually robots. They're technology. They're not real aliens. They're part biologics and part technology, which is also another possibility. My friend's idea is based on a scientific theory, which is the spatial theory of relativity, that states that any object that has a mass cannot travel faster than light. And the way we can challenge that is by have you imagine, let's say we have a cockroach and we're putting it on a piece of paper. I know most people hate cockroaches, but we're putting one on a piece of paper and it's not trying to fly, it's just sitting there, just walking around. And I grab the piece of paper, fold it in half, and now all of a sudden a cockroach goes from one side of the paper to the other. Similarly, what we could potentially do is have a bent of space-time, and that will allow us to travel from one point to the other. And I know we have to be careful with stating something like this because we currently don't have that technology. But nothing forbids a higher civilization that has been around for a longer time to develop a technology that is able to do this. And you say, wait a minute, we don't really have evidence of that, right? We know that space-time as it is, and the idea of space-time is really explored by Einstein's theory of relativity. What we know is, first of all, if we consider the Big Bang to be true, what we know is that the universe is expanding. So space-time is constantly modifying itself. But what we also know from the theory of relativity is that an object like Earth that has its own mass is able to exercise gravity. And we used to think that gravity was something inherent to Earth, maybe explained by the magnetic core, and objects like Earth, planets, and stars could have their own gravity. But according to Einstein's theory of relativity, the reason why we have gravity is that an object with that mass is actually able to exercise a bend into space-time that allows objects to either stay trapped in a trajectory around that object or actually collide with the object itself. And what scientists believe is that we actually can bend space-time as well. Any object that has a mass can actually bend space-time. So if we're bending space-time, we grab the universe itself, bend it like a piece of paper, and now if you have a spaceship, you can travel from point A to B, and it will look like you've crossed thousands and thousands of light years, but in reality, you just jump from one place to another because we were able to bend space-time. And the idea that we could bend space-time, it could be far-fetched for a lot of people. The best scientific-like explanation that I received is that this craft, if they're able to travel this far and they're able to maneuver the way we've seen, they have to essentially create wormholes where essentially they appear from one place to another. And that's how they can travel that fast. They can appear, travel around. These crafts seem to defy the laws of gravity, and therefore they seem to manipulate gravity. And the way we can see gravity being manipulated is through wormholes. The theory that there are wormholes out there started because of the idea that black holes could actually be the entrance of a wormhole that connects one universe to another. You say, wait a second, now we're talking about multiple universes. Well, yes, there are theories out there like string theory that tie up to this idea of the multiverse. Michio Kaku actually has talked a lot about this. Michio Kaku is a physicist who I highly suggest. He's agnostic. He doesn't worry himself with the idea of God. It's just bothering himself with understanding physics and how reality can be explained. Therefore, it could be a good resource if you're an atheist or if you're agnostic. But the idea is that essentially we don't have a universe, we can have multiverses. And these multiverses essentially sit in like a bubble bath. They're like bubbles. And what you know about bubble baths is that bubbles can collide and can make something bigger. And essentially what we think is that black holes or wormholes may lead into another universe. So if we stay limited with our understanding, if we stay limited to classic physics or maybe just a theory of relativity, if we don't go any deeper, we're essentially limiting the possibility of finding technology that could actually help us achieve that, achieve space travel or time travel. So if we go from a limited perspective, we will never be able to achieve those things. And by the way, this is not a science work. When people believed that the Earth was flat, those scientists that went and provided mathematical explanations on why we live in a globe and we don't live in a flat Earth, they faced persecution. And science has never been for the close-minded. The scientific process is a logical process that is, however, aided by creativity. If you cannot think outside of the box, if you cannot think about solutions outside of the box, you cannot advance science. To the people that are stuck in classical physics, I would like for you guys to really check out what we're able to achieve through quantum physics. In quantum physics, we have achieved teleportation as the transmission of energy from point A to B really fast. And essentially what's happening is that if you have like this idea of microphone in point A, we can recreate the idea of microphone in a totally different location. So it will be the transfer of information. So nothing forbids some kind of holographic information to be transmitted from one universe to another, and it may be a form of communication. So who knows, maybe the UAPs, that's what they are. So I would like for the people who are skeptical to keep an open mind, and that's my main point. Now let's go a step deeper for those of you who are interested in spirituality. There are a couple, there is what we know to be true. There is the evidence that the government and private citizens have provided. And so far I haven't seen any evidence of biologics, except for the testimonies in Congress. I haven't seen any evidence of crafts that we recovered, although the people who testified in front of Congress, they talk about the spacecrafts that we've recovered and how for decades we've been using anti-gravity technology and we've been able to work with that. And so it's really interesting, but that's all happening through Congress. There are several people, Congress people, and the president, they're interested in this topic, and they would really like disclosure. To me, in order to say that there is proof that we have evidence of life out there that's coming to visit us, you will either have to bring a biologic or actually show us the technology. So I think those will be the main two things. But let's talk a little bit about the lore around UAPs. So for years I've been following figures like Dr. Greer, essentially who claims that he has made contact and he has a method for you to make contact. Where is the connection there? Well, if you think about it, from a multidimensional perspective, what we know from, for instance, string theory is that we potentially believe that there could be 10 or 11 dimensions. Let's take back the example of the cockroach and the piece of paper. If the piece of paper were reality, the cockroach would be able to move in a two-dimensional way. Now, if you bent the paper, you create the third dimension. So nothing forbids a three-dimensional creature like myself to go and look into the paper and interact with it. So that could be a possibility. Now, if you consider time the fourth dimension, live in a four-dimensional reality, there could be a fifth and a sixth and a seventh, and there could be living things in this higher dimensional realities. And because they're superposed, they're looking at us from their perspective, they will be actually able to interact with us at their will and without us being even familiar with it or realizing that they're there looking at us. So the theory is that a lot of this, I literally have goosebumps talking about this, that a lot of these beings could be multidimensional, which means at any given moment, they could come and visit you. They don't need a door. They don't need a spacecraft. They could just open a portal and pop their heads out and say hello. So that's from the multidimensional perspective. Literally getting goosebumps. This is kind of hard to discuss. You have the other idea that because they are more evolved, they may be able to communicate with us telepathically. On the topic of telepathy, I will invite you to look at the telepathy files, which are found on YouTube. You could easily find them. And essentially, those files are based on the fact that nonverbal kids who are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, they may be able to communicate telepathically with other kids who are on the spectrum or their family members. So telepathy has been somewhat documented among humans. Now, you can imagine if you are more evolved, you can communicate telepathically. Even through the aid of technology, we've done that. We put electrodes in the brain and been able to translate that into some form of communication. So what's based behind what Greer has put out there as a method is the fact that we can communicate telepathically. So at any given moment, I can connect through my thought to these beings and communicate with them, and I can receive knowledge. And through meditation, I can reach those states where I can communicate telepathically. According to Greer, when this happens, a spacecraft can actually pop out of nowhere, and you will be able to communicate with them. And that's what a lot of people are struggling with, that the fact that we may try to explain this with the current science, but if they're truly ultra-dimensional beings, they can pop at their own will, they can come visit, they can make themselves visible, they could be around us at any given time and communicate telepathically, those will look to us as if they have this great technology, when in reality it's part of the properties of that specific dimension they're in. And maybe they could even drag us into that dimension, and there could be an evolutionary push for us. There are several people that say they're in contact with civilizations out there who live in the 5th and 6th dimension, and they're able to get knowledge back and forth. They're able to talk to them. The other main theory is that they've actually lived among us for a long time. They have bases that are hidden from us. They may have bases on the moon, and they're physical. They're three-dimensional physical beings just like us. They're able to cloak themselves in a way that we can see them, and perhaps we're interacting with them daily. There is another theory that is out there. And then the third final theory, and I hear this mostly in Christian circles, all of these beings that essentially pretending to be from another planet, and they're actually demons. Even the Vice President J.D. Vance, put this theory out there that this could be demons. Here's my opinion on it. I believe that there are multiple dimensions. I believe that we can travel between dimensions. And some of these are physical beings that may be from a different dimension. I believe we also have beings that are from a dimension that's very similar to ours, or the same dimension, that are just able to travel through space-time. I also believe that some of these beings are more spiritual. If the Christians are correct, if these are demons that are interacting with us, there must be angels out there that are also interacting with us. And they may not present like we imagine an angel. They might not have beautiful faces and wings. They might just have big heads and big eyes, or be made of light. So all those things could be true. And I believe that because we don't really have enough proof from the government, even after we receive these files, we don't have anybody who has come out there and tried to make sense of all of them. We just have files, and essentially they're left to us as here, make up your own opinion. And the problem is that people like Greer and other ufologists that have been following these topics for decades, they've been talking time and time again about next year, 2027, being the year of disclosure. But what they've been also saying is that this is a false flag operation. Let's make it relevant to us. As somebody who believes in spirituality, I believe it's important to question whether these beings are real or not, whether they're spiritual or not, whether they work through the spiritual realm, and whether they can be good or bad. And I've told you my opinion on good or bad before. Good or bad, good and bad are relative ideas. Relative to your society, relative to your morals. So from their perspective, if they're truly bad and they're coming here to harvest souls according to the Christians, or harvest bodies according to some of the ufologists out there, from their perspective it's not bad. They're just eating. Just like you and I may be eating plants that are living things, or animals that are living things. So once again, good and bad are relative ideas, depending on who you are, what you think, your morality, your moral compass, and where you're standing. So from the spiritual perspective, it's really important to ask ourselves, that this being spiritual, can they communicate telepathically? Can I make contact already by opening my mind and trying to connect telepathically with them? From a masculine perspective, these beings could be either something that's going to make the world a better place, or they could be a threat. So from the masculine perspective, how do you analyze threat? There are several ways. First of all, look at all of the information that's coming. Always connect it through other things. Why is the information out there? Think about it. What's the purpose? Why do we have these batches of files that are being released very slowly? They get increasingly more crazy, but we haven't had the biologics yet. We haven't had the technology yet. We talk about masculine archetypes. Masculinity is about protection and preserving, and you cannot protect and preserve if you're being controlled from the outside. So masculinity comes with a lot of self-control as well. There's lots of questions here. I believe this topic could be explored some more. My opinion is that we indeed live in a reality where we have multidimensional beings. The higher up you are in the dimension, the more spiritual-like you are. So things that we've been calling gods and angels, I believe they're just multidimensional beings. And because they're multidimensional, we can see the things they're able to do may appear to us supernatural, or they may appear to us as if they have greater technology, but in reality, those are qualities of those dimensions. I also believe that as you get into the lower dimension, we have more of this dichotomy between good and evil. And this doesn't necessarily exist at the higher dimension. In the lower dimension, it's more about a conversation about control, about good and evil, what's right and what's wrong. In the higher dimension, it's about existing and pushing life forward. And that's another belief I have. And finally, I believe there are beings within our own dimensional level that may be able to travel at really fast speeds or warp the universe. Fox News has been recently talking about 4 alien races that we may be aware of. One of them is the Nordics. My belief, first of all, I don't call them Nordics. They're allegedly from the Pleiades, so they're Pleiadians. And my belief is that if the Nordics are real, they could be a 4th dimensional being, potentially dwelling between the 4th and the 5th dimension, and they're able to travel. There could be gray aliens or gray-like. A lot of them are being of light. They're entirely made of light. A lot of them, they're grays. The grays, they're lower vibrational. And the theories out there is that the grays are work bees, so that many times you may make contact with an alien species that utilizes the grays during this travel. When you make contact with a higher being, which is also some sort of spiritual contact, you may have a transfer of knowledge. It may feel like an angelic being. You may feel surrounded by light. Many times you're focusing on the main being, but there could be hundreds of other beings that look just like gray aliens around you. So I think if gray aliens are real, we may have what we consider the short gray aliens, the tall gray aliens. Some of them look the same, but they're made of light. And then 2 other types that I'm not really familiar with. Those are the reptilians, which I'm not familiar with. If the reptilians are real, according to what you find online, they're lower vibrational beings. They're all about control. So my belief, if those beings were to be real, those would be the closest to an actual demon. They have a lower vibration. If we consider vibration to be equal a dimension, there would be a lower dimensional being. And then the insectoids, I'm also not familiar with those. I've encountered people before who claim that I've made contact with the insectoids, and essentially those are fixers, according to them. So, point of all of this is that there is some truth out there. I caution you to be careful with considering everything that you find online to be true. I will always, because this channel is about spirituality fundamentally, I will always talk about my own spiritual experience, but it will always be centered on the fact that this is reality, this is what we know, this is what we know to be true, and this is the lore around it, these are the stories, this is the mythology around it. So from a scientific perspective, what we know is that we have unidentified aerial and maritime phenomena. So they're able to travel through air and water, and that we don't know what they are. We have legitimate accounts of things and phenomena that have happened, but we don't know what they are. So that's the reality. And since we want to be grounded in reality, we want to utilize the scientific process, we want to look at this evidence, but keep an open mind. There could be many things. Now, from the metaphysical, mythological lore, then my personal belief is that there are spiritual beings out there, that there is between source, which is what I call God, and us, and by the way, we're all source, we're all part of divine, according to my belief. I believe there are several layers. They're more source-like or more human-like or more reality, physical-like. So that's why I can believe simultaneously that there is one God, because there is one source, but I can also believe there are layers. And even in monotheistic traditions such as Christianity, Judaism, Islam, we have angels, we have demons, and those will be, all of those beings, they're above humans from an evolutionary perspective, if we consider spirituality part of evolution, but they're not quite God. So this concept is not completely far-fetched. I believe that every religion, in a way, is some sort of polytheistic pagan religion. Now, it's your choice whether you want to worship Source or you want to talk to an angel directly, but we also have a phenomenon within monotheistic religions where people are just have a special relationship with a saint or an angel or somebody else who's not quite God, but almost there. It's in between. So I don't think, from a religious perspective, it's completely far-fetched. Now, if you're atheist or agnostic, this is completely far-fetched. And I believe it's part of the responsibility of spiritual people is that if we are trying to give a message out there, is that we have to be very careful to consider those individuals as well. So my invitation, if you don't believe in anything, is to keep an open mind. This could be just perfectly explainable phenomena. I think a lot of times people record UFOs that just glare on a glass. Or there could be something more to it. I would say keep an open mind. Science has never advanced from a perspective of closed-mindedness. Science has always advanced from open-mindedness, from curiosity, from allowing yourself to think outside of the box. And from a spiritual perspective, if you're spiritual and you have solid foundations when it comes to your spirituality, you have a lot to think about. Because yes, this could be angels, this could be demons, this could be spiritual beings of other type that your religion may not have explored. So where do you stand with your religion? Does it become questionable? That's why I believe if we're going to have disclosure, it's not going to be all at once. It's going to be little by little. Because if we truly have beings from a different planet coming to visit, a lot of what we believe to be true will be questionable. Thank you for watching.